view on YouTube. And copy the link, send it to y'all. Let me post it on Base Leftists so I can.
Appreciate it.
It's fast typing.
Welcome everyone to a debate with myself, Bluepilled, Patriot Politics, and Based Theocratic. As you can see by the title of this debate, we'll be debating the efficacy of immigration on today's society. I assume we will be taking multiple routes in this discussion, but the main topic of today is going to be the efficacy of immigration in today's society. Myself and Blue will be going for the side that immigration is positive to society, and Patriot Politics and Based Theocratic Boy will be arguing from a restrictionist perspective and arguing that immigration is negative for society. I hope you all can enjoy the debate today, and I hope you all have a great time enjoying our conversation today about immigration and everything that it might entail. I'm really happy. We can get started. I guess I want to go over the basic format of the debate. We'll start out with a little bit of an open statement on both sides, followed by, a little bit of open dialogue between both of our sides. And then afterwards, after all of that's done, we will move into closing statements on either side. Depending on how many people watch the stream or are watching the stream, we might open it for questions either through the YouTube chat or through the specific questions channel in the Base Leftist Discord. If you're not in the Discord, you can go to our TikTok. In our bio, we have our Discord. You know what? I'll just post the link on the YouTube chat just in case anyone in the stream currently is not a part of the Discord yet. If you're not, then great. Oh, thanks, Luke Prim. I guess I'm a moron. Awesome. Okay. So let's get started. I guess because you are the guests, Patriot and Based Theocratic Boy will allow you to have the first opening statement. Whenever you wish to begin, you may start. Either one of you may make the opening statement.
Yeah, sure. I'll read. All right. In 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed into law the Hart-Celler Immigration Act. It abolished the national origins formula, which had been the basis of America's immigration policy since the 1920s. Since then, 72 million people have been added to the U.S. population, and our population is estimated to reach 400 million by 2050. Immigrants make up 65 of the 72 million. The native population is being superseded by foreigners at an alarming rate. We've been below replacement birth rate in the United States for decades now, falling from 3.65 births per woman in the year 1960 to 1.77 in the year 2017. This trend is occurring not only in the US, but in the UK and Australia as well, among others. Mass immigration has fostered comparable results across the globe. Seph and I agree that mass immigration incurs cultural, economic, and fiscal burdens on native-born Americans. Today's immigrants differ drastically from those of the past. The state of our country does as well. We've reached a point at which we believe mass immigration is no longer necessary to replenish the workforce and instead does more harm than good for native-born Americans. There's no conceivable world in which American families are given precedence while mass immigration persists.
Okay, awesome. Okay, that was an opening statement. I will make my opening statement as well. Bluepill, are you okay with me making the opening statement?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'd like to declare that immigration is a positive force for our society with two basic metrics. Number one, I believe that immigration is a positive economic benefit to us. Not only does it increase the economic ability of all of us within the country, it increases wages, it increases productivity, and it increases the overall economy. for all Americans within our society. It is an undeniable fact that immigration is a positive effect for not only native-born workers, but also immigrants and people who come into this country looking for a better life. Next, I will say why I believe immigration is a positive light from a philosophical perspective. I will be declaring immigration to be a positive force for people, not only because it increases the enrichment of people within our country, but also because it allows people from other countries who are living terrible, decrepit lives in their own country to come and get new opportunities in the United States of America. I think it's a beautiful, amazing thing that people from other countries who are living terrible, decrepit lives in their impoverished places, that they can come to the United States and help enrich the benefits of our country, as well as participating in our free and democratic society. Now, I know there's a problem. There's probably a lot of people out there who disagree with me. I know both of you do, in fact. You probably believe that immigration is negative, and per your opening statement, definitely you believe that as well. However, I just fundamentally disagree, because your positions are not founded on empirical data and facts. Rather, they are founded in a place of distrust and disingenuousness. That was my opening statement. We can move into the open dialogue. Who wants to start first?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, which topic do you want to? Do you want to just jump right into economics?
I would rather go into the economic department first.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so what evidence do you have that immigration is negative in terms of the economic department?
Well, I think you have the burden of proof, so I think you should provide.
Wait, why would we have the burden of proof?
You made a negative claim as well. You stated, quote by quote, in your opening statement that immigration negatively affected the economy. That's what you said.
All right, sure. Yeah, I can go through it. All right, so a prevalent claim is that immigration has a net positive effect on the economy, but it's more or less a broken window fallacy. And this is because 98% of the GDP immigrants generate go back to the immigrants themselves, often through benefits. Native-born people don't benefit, and we don't have an obligation to these immigrants to, just use our vast economic opportunities. And on top of that, every 1% increase in immigration increases housing prices, rent prices 1%, and housing prices 2%.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to take this claim that native workers are impacted negatively by immigration. This claim is completely unfounded. Your idea of a broken window fallacy on this particular point is completely and totally, just unequivocally false. So I would like to read from a study from the National Bureau of Economic Research by Ottaviano and Perry from 2006. It finds that the average American wage rises due to immigration. This is native wages, by the way. In fact, your very point about 90% of the benefits going back to immigrants is just completely false, because it finds that new immigration severely impacts the wages of prior immigrants, suggesting a lack of substitutability with the natives. So the only people that the immigration is hurting in this particular circumstance are the immigrants themselves. So that broken window fallacy claim is just completely and totally unfounded.
Okay, so first I want to point out that I didn't really mention anything about the effects on the individual workers. I'm just speaking in a general net sense. But another thing about the wages, that's when you don't control for geographical migration. And 𝗷𝗘𝗧𝗪 𝗏 does indeed control for geographical migration. And the only people that don't receive a wage reduction are those in the very top. So what we find is that, hold on one second.
Could I respond to the Borjas thing?
I just want to finish this point, and then you.
Okay, go ahead. I could post. Okay, go ahead. Go on.
All right. So basically, what we find is that immigration redistributes wealth from those who compete with immigrants to those who use immigrants, from the employee to the employer. The total wealth redistribution from the native losers to the native winners is enormous, roughly $500 billion a year. So what we find is that the immigrants are gaining at the expense of native-born workers.
Through what? I mean, okay, so are you saying through welfare or through like some...
Well, here,
welfare programs? Because
immigration has changed how the money is.
Patriot, if you're going to make the point that they receive more benefits than the native worker, you'd just be wrong on that side, because you aren't. They don't use more benefits than the native worker, right? Immigrants on average actually use less welfare programs and less government subsidized programs than native people do. And if I could respond to your Borjas point, in fact, multiple people have looked at the Borjas methodology when accounting for geographical, basically using geographical cells instead of you looking at the specific occupational. What they found was the methodology doesn't just measure labor demand. And I could send you this. I could send you the Cato study, but essentially within the methodology of Borjas, they included a negative coefficient in the methodology that they shouldn't have included, and it skewed the results completely. When they did actually account for a lot of this stuff, what they found was it more or less basically streamlined with what we expected the wage stagnation or even increase to look like. So citing Borjas as a source for why wages actually decrease is not an actually good point, because his studies are extremely and totally and completely flawed.
Okay, I just want to touch upon the first point that you brought up about immigrants using welfare at a lower rate. According to NAP.edu, 58.2% of immigrant households compared to 41.8% of native households use any form of welfare. When you look at Medicaid, 45.7% of immigrant households use it, and 33.8% of native-born households use Medicaid. The only form of welfare in which immigrants use less than native-born households is cash assistance.
Oh, wow. Okay. So basically, I think, could you cite the NAP study that you're talking about? Because I think I know what it is.
Yeah, sure. Let me try to find it. Hold on.
Also, to everyone saying Cato moment.
And okay. Yeah, is your welfare data coming from Cato? Because I'd like to discuss that if it is.
Wait, why? If it's coming from Cato, what do you have to say about that?
Well, is it coming from Cato?
Yeah.
Wait.
Okay, so Cato doesn't take into account second-generation immigrants who actually bring a fiscal burden much larger than the first generation.
What is a second-generation immigrant?
Okay,
is that not just like
the children of the first-generation immigrants? So the first-generation immigrants have a legal obligation to the second-generation immigrants to provide necessities. But what we find is that the government are providing these necessities, but Cato includes second-generation immigrants as native-born citizens, so it's kind of disingenuous.
Wait.
What?
What do you mean? Cato includes native-born Americans as native-born Americans. People born in America.
Second-generation.
Wait.
Second-generation immigrants are native-born Americans. What are you saying?
This is such a weirdly disingenuous point. You're trying to argue that because there's a lot of immigrants, they should be treated differently? No, they're native-born Americans. Of course, they're going to be treated as such.
Of course.
What is your contention? This is mind-bogglingly esoteric.
The first-generation immigrants have a legal obligation to the second-generation immigrants that they are not fulfilling. It is the government fulfilling. The government is giving the first-generation immigrants the resources needed for the second-generation immigrants to survive, basic necessities like food, clothing, and medical care. But Cato includes the resources that are allocated to these first-generation immigrants for the use of the second-generation immigrants as native welfare, which is disingenuous.
What are you talking about?
It does.
For the welfare programs that have a unit of assistance that is a household, that the unit of assistance for these welfare programs are included with the household, because that's how the money is distributed. It includes the household as the unit of assistance, meaning it counts the children as part of the immigrant wages. What are you talking about? I'm
almost certain that Cato splits the they have a split, unlike a lot of Cato basically they recognize that they categorically exclude the second generation immigrants when you're looking at the households. They categorically exclude
the money that goes to the second generation immigrants from the first generation immigrants, or are you talking about the money that goes to the second generation immigrants?
I believe. Hold on. I believe it is the money.
No, okay. So I guess what I'm asking, if I could clarify my point a little bit better, is this the money that is going directly from the first generation immigrant to the second generation immigrant, or is it the money that is directly going to the second generation immigrant?
Well, it's going to the second generation immigrant in the sense that they are consuming it, but I'm almost certain that it goes to the first generation immigrant.
In
But
the sense that they are descendants of the first generation immigrant?
Yeah, so if it goes to the first generation immigrant, it is counted under the immigrant status in the Cato Institute's study on welfare.
Can you just send me that source, though?
Yeah, I can. It's the Cato Institute. Basically, if I could explain it a little bit further, I'll send it here. I'll send it in sources on the Waste Leftists YouTube Discord, and I'll ping you. But essentially, the way they do it, right, is certain welfare programs, right, include, certain welfare programs have a unit of assistance of the individual. That is, it's distributed to the individual. However, other welfare programs have a unit assistant of a household. That is, the money from those welfare programs go to households instead of individuals. And because those and certain welfare programs that go to households versus individuals, they don't basically count a household with 2 immigrants and 1 native-born second-generation immigrant as being a native household. They count that as being an immigrant household. I don't know where you got the information that they did, but that's not part of their methodology.
I'd like to see the source because I'm almost certain that.
In the sources channel.
Sources channel. Where's the sources channel? It's on private chat.
Oh, we put sources in the in the sources channel.
Yeah,
on the Discord.
Yeah, on Discord.
I just like one. Well, it wasn't only when we were talking about Borjas. It wasn't only just Borjas that found that when taking into the fact geographical migrations, wages lower. There's some other economists that also found that they lower, like Anthony Edo, Joseph Price, other. I'll send the sources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. Basic theocratic boy. I understand that, right? But they all used similar methodologies in terms of the way that they modeled the immigration data in order to come to their conclusions. And their conclusions were genuinely skewed by methodologies that they used in terms of normally they added a negative coefficient. This is hard to understand if you aren't very well versed in the math, but essentially the model itself is just supposed to measure labor demand, that is the demand for labor that is needed within a country. However, when doing some explications of the model, they found that the model didn't just measure labor demand, it also measured something else that was contributing to the model being skewed. So they had basically the model is flawed. And when fixing the model to make it more economically literate or mathematically correct, they found that the model essentially streamlined to what we believe the wage decreases actually equate to, right?
Sure. I just want to say we were to concede to the wages. Do you have anything to say about the increase in rent prices, because that affects them similarly, where they're losing expendable capital.
Why are you saying that rent prices go up?
Why am I what?
Claiming that rent prices go up. What is the claim there? Like
for every 1% increase in immigration, rent prices increase 1% and housing prices increase 2%. And the thing is that we're also not seeing a 1% increase in immigration. We're seeing much larger incremental change.
As the economy gets better, right? Is that the claim?
Wait, what?
As people bring more money in, things get more expensive?
As, it hurts native-born Americans financially.
But don't wages also go up?
as more
So you're
demand
saying
as more demand comes in, but supply doesn't change, prices are going to increase.
Okay, so your argument is that when people come into this country, the immigrants increase the overall.
Do you want me to send you the source?
I would love the source. Correct.
Yeah, sure.
I've never heard this argument before, but that's
theocratic. Do you know which? Because we have like do you know which one? Are they all the same thing?
What do you mean?
The sources under the 1% increase in rent.
Hold on, I have them on hand. Hold on.
Yeah, can you send them in private chat?
Yeah, I will. Yeah. Yeah, I got them right here.
All right, just send them.
okay.
There, I put them in.
Which one
With
is
the
it?
1%, okay, plus 2% in buying houses. Okay, this is a immigration and housing. Okay, I'll take the first study. This seems like a decent study. Okay. Housing markets. Okay, so let's say I assume this question to be true, right? Let's say I assume that for every 1% of immigrants that come into this country, there is a 1% increase in the immigration inflow that amounts to 1% of the initial metropolitan area population is associated with roughly a 1% increase in rents and housing values.
And 1% increase in rent and 2% increase in housing.
Sure, by 1%. Arguably, the labor, the timber, typical. Okay, so a 1% increase in rent. Now, it seems to me like this would economically translate to to it being harder for people to buy houses. I'm not sure if a 1% difference in rent is going to do much of anything to the economy.
Well, the thing is that we're not seeing just a 1% increase in immigration. So it may be a minor difference when you're looking at if we were to only have 1% increase.
Okay, so also the studies that you've provided say that it doesn't compound necessarily. Okay. This isn't good. The studies that you've cited here cite Borjas as a methodological model in order to determine the influx of wages into the environment with immigrants increasing. So just from that fact and how flawed Borjas' methodology is, I don't necessarily the problem with this, right, is when you send me sources, I can't necessarily read them in like 2 minutes.
Yeah, of course.
Decide whether I like the source or not, whether it's actually valid. I could possibly look something up and try to figure out if this is a general consensus across economists, and then I could say, okay, well, morally speaking, I don't.
Did Seph send you multiple studies or just one?
Sent me 4.
Oh, he said, all right.
Even 𝗙𝗘𝗔𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗜𝗡𝗚 said it compounds.
Yeah, even 𝗙𝗘𝗔𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗜𝗡 admitted that it increases rent and housing prices. It's a pretty general consensus.
Okay, let me see. Does immigration increase rent prices? Study says.
Here, I'll put 801 in.
Veritable. Okay, so so we accept this as fact, right? Let's say that immigrants do in fact increase the rent prices and the housing prices of a specific community based on that geographical location. I don't understand, number one, why this wouldn't. Wait. Okay, so 1% increase in rent prices combined with an on average increase in wages due to immigration for native foreign workers. So it would kind of balance out, wouldn't it? Like,
do you have anything that compares raises
yeah,
and
like
wages?
the wages. Yeah, sorry, Britt, go ahead.
Well, just because when you have an influx in immigration, it leads to an influx in wages. It would make sense that as more money enters an area, that prices on housing would get more expensive. Do you have anything that shows that these changes in pricing would be more so than the changes in wages?
Yeah,
in turn,
I'm almost certain that the studies that claim that immigration raises wages, they admit that it stagnates after I'm not sure how many year period, but after a certain year period, and we see that it doesn't stagnate after a 10-year period. I'm almost certain that the studies admit that.
I read the NBER study. It doesn't. I don't.
Can you send it to me?
Yeah.
Or did you? All right. Let's see.
Right. Like okay, but do you have any studies that this is making it harder for people to get houses?
I mean, I could try to produce. I don't. But
I mean, okay.
Even if we're looking at this, it kind of produces a neutral effect. Like if both things kind of cancel out one another.
What do you mean? Okay, so I would say that premise one in this argument, right, on your side, is that immigration increases the prices of housing, right? And you're trying to get to the conclusion, right, that immigration is ultimately bad for the native worker. So the only way that you would be able to follow the premise one to the conclusion.
Well, there are other metrics that we can talk about later, but sure, continue.
No. Okay, so the only way you would be able to prove that because rent prices increase, it is bad for your average native worker is if the average increase in the average,
standard of living
increase in rent prices impedes a native person's ability to buy a house or to get a property for themselves. Like, I don't think there's a housing crisis in the United States.
No, there definitely is not.
Well, I think we need to look in the metropolitan areas, especially because immigrants disproportionately flock to these metropolitan areas.
What? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we need to
areas. There isn't a housing crisis or anything.
I don't have really the data on this, but I could try to produce it right now.
For your conclusion to follow from your premises, you need this point.
Yeah, it's pretty essential.
Well, would the point still stand if there were other defects that may also, in addition to the increase in rent and housing, affect a native worker's ability to, purchase things or purchase houses for this instance?
What do you mean by other defects? Could you elaborate?
Yeah, sure. All right, so
yes.
So I think we need to look at the correlation between increased number in immigrants and employment. Now, I know it doesn't necessarily decrease employment, but it's pretty disingenuous or misleading for that matter, because if we look at the number of employed persons from January 2000 to January 2018, that number increased by 17.9 million. During the same period, the working age population grew by 45.3 million. Economists will claim that this is because the working age population is growing older and retiring. That only accounts for half of those not in the labor force. As we saw above, there are now 60.2 million 16 to 64-year-olds not in the labor force. So whatever your economic or political views, this is not a good indicator. Labor force participation has dropped 4% since 2000 pre-COVID. So, I mean, like it's
Probably.
supply and demand. I mean, when supply of workers increases drastically, but demand for labor doesn't follow suit, there are people who will be left vulnerable and displaced.
Okay, so first, I'd respond with 2 points against that. Number one, I know you didn't directly make the point that it decreases employment, but I'm just going to address it as kind of a final stand. It seems to be, the economic data seems to say that essentially immigrants and native workers don't compete for mostly the same jobs. In fact, immigrants compete for different jobs among each other, and native workers seem to compete for different jobs among each other. There isn't really much interplay between the two, and when there is, it doesn't seem to be that economically damaging to the native workers. It seems to just be like the general competitive model that we've had for so many years under capitalism. To address the labor force participation point, I'd address the labor force participation rate declining to 2 specific factors. Number one, automation, and number 2, probably capitalism.
Capitalism. All right. So, what was the point you brought up right before the labor force participation again? Sorry.
Why employment doesn't decrease due to immigration.
Oh, okay.
I know it seems intuitive, but
well, here's the thing. So, immigrants drop out of high school at a disproportionate, like they drop out of high school 3 times that, I believe, of native-born Americans. And so you would think that they would be most competitive with this group. And so we see a high school dropouts wage reduced by 1.7% at the fault of immigration. And another thing to point out is that of the 474 separate and recognized occupations, wait, hold on. I just got of the 474 separate and recognized civilian occupations in America, only 6 are a majority immigrant, both legal and illegal. Native workers still comprise 46% of workers in these professions, and there's not a single occupation that consists of majority illegal immigrants. So it is not as if, these jobs are completely designated immigrant workers, and they're not necessarily exclusive to these immigrants. And I think another thing to point out is not as if the native workers refuse to fill the other 54%, they merely desire to work for a living wage amid tolerable working conditions, whereas immigrants could care less. I mean, if these jobs were to go unfilled, we could have a conversation about, the role of automation rather than automation displacing jobs. But because we filled these jobs with third world immigrants, we can't have this conversation in any way.
Okay, so I'd like to address both of those points, one of which was the high school dropout rate. I mean, I know you probably disagree with me on this. You definitely do. But I would attribute most of the immigrants dropping out due to, number one, how bad our education system is when it comes to funding, as in we fund our schools through property taxes, right? I mean, that's literally a terrible way to organize education. And then number 2, I would say that it has a lot to do with systemic racism. And I don't want to get into that because I know that you disagree with me on that. However, you could just take my first point as probably evidence of why I believe.
Wait, let me get one thing.
Wait, could I respond to
systemic racism against
the immigrants?
Well, the majority of immigrants are Hispanic, so systemic racism against Hispanic people.
I mean, that's probably that does exist. It's not just African Americans.
So let me get this straight. You think that immigrants are dropping out of school because it's the school fault, and then it's also racism fault?
Well, wait, no. Immigrants moving into poorer areas on the basis that they're immigrants, right? And then being in schools that are severely underfunded due to the fact that their school is run off of property taxes would probably lead to not getting the best education and in turn dropping out.
Sure, but the point isn't necessarily that, immigrants drop out at a higher rate. The point is that they do, and thus we're seeing, the results, because the high school dropouts is the group they would be most competitive with, and thus we see the high school dropouts receiving we see low wage workers being disproportionately impacted.
Well,
Yeah.
I feel like
That's just the point. That's just the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, okay. So I've got a couple of comments on this. Number one, I do know and I do accept and acknowledge the fact that high school dropouts receive a decrease in wages. However, right, what we see is that over time, this decrease becomes negligible. In fact, most of the studies that cite this agree that this basic, this dropouts, which make up less than 10% of the population, experience a slight decrease, which alleviates with time. There's evidence that immigration increases native high school graduation rates too. So not only is this a very slight decrease that basically alleviates itself over time, but the population of people that actually receives this decrease in wages are in fact decreasing over time, meaning that this effect is negligible. To counteract this effect, what I would probably do as a policy position, or someone who would do policy, right, is I would probably institute redistributive policies in order to account for this decrease in wages for the ever decreasing high school dropout population. So that would be my basic solution for that. So there isn't really much of a negative effect on these high school dropouts. It's just a very tiny, almost statistically insignificant effect that alleviates over time and is quite negligible to the people who actually experience it.
Well, I think another thing to point out is you said immigrants increase graduation rates among native-born. How is that necessarily causation? Like, there's just is it the more diversity, the higher?
I mean, I can give you the.
Yeah.
Wait, do you know how? I've heard this a lot. Do you know how? Multi
regressional analysis?
Yeah,
multivariate
regression analysis. Right? So, do you know the way that you try to find causation in a sociological study?
I'm not too well versed on it now.
Okay, so the way you figure out causation in a sociological study is you control for two variables and you try to account for as many confounding variables as you can. And when you find the eventual result, if there is a statistically significant correlation between two variables, it's safe to assume that there's some causal mechanism that is essentially causing one variable to cause another, right? So that is essentially the causation. Now, the way you figure out what causes what and how it causes is through scientific and sociological theories, right? So I'm not essentially sure how the causal mechanism makes immigrants increase the graduation rates in native-born populations. But the fact is, when accounting for all meaningful confounding variables, we still find this increase in high school graduation rates among native-born peoples, suggesting that this is in some way, shape, or form a causative relationship between these two variables.
All right. I just want to also ask. What amount of responsibility do you put on the immigrants themselves when we're talking dropping out of high school? I think a little bit. Would you agree that lower academic performance kind of incentivizes dropping out? Like if someone's doing work,
academic performance incentivizes dropping out. Okay, so I guess I could address this in a twofold argument. I generally don't really care that much if immigrants are getting A's on tests in school, right? If they are doing that, that's awesome, and I'm glad they're doing that, right? I'm glad they're taking the opportunity to further their own education. But if they don't, and they're a productive member of society, I don't care.
I got a question. Do you think that funding correlates with outcome?
Funding correlates with outcome, as in funding schools?
School funding, yes.
Okay. Yes, it undeniably empirically.
Check.
Wait, I'll actually. Can I take this theocratic? I don't have the actual stats on me, but black students, when you look at pure per pupil funding receive more than their white counterparts, yet
Go ahead.
statistically do worse.
Wait, okay, what do you mean they receive more funding?
If you break it down individually per pupil, Black students receive more funding than their white counterparts.
Okay, that
I actually have the data written down somewhere, but let me try to find it. Hold on. Okay.
Hey, check sources about the funding correlating with outcome.
okay.
But I found my notes on the Black student funding. If you want me to cite those.
This is a Medium article.
Sure. All right. So if you look at where the funding.
Medium article.
No, I'll read it though. I'll read it. I'll see what it says.
Oh, test scores? It doesn't prove outcomes though.
Wait.
All right. But let me
Wait, actually, I'm curious. Let's back up. Wait, why is it that African Americans who aren't really an immigrant group for the most part in this country?
Wait. Also, okay, sorry. I'm sorry for interrupting you.
Don't
worry.
The black-white funding gap that makes literally no fucking sense. Schools in America are funded by property taxes. There's literally no way that schools communities would be funded more than people in.
It's not. You see, it's not necessarily the schools. There's a study that shows that poor and minority students receive 1% to 2% more resources than non-poor and white people when they're in the same district. Because whiter school districts get more funding, but whiter schools get less funding within school districts, we have to look at school level spending to see the true effects. There was a study done in 2008 that calculated the spending per pupil in U.S. schools from 1972 to 2002, and it found that in 1972, the ratio of non-white to white spending was 0.98, and this trend had reversed by 1982 because the spending for non-white students was slightly higher than funding for whites in most states, and this stayed consistent into 2000.
I don't get the relevance of this point, though. Why are we talking about this?
We kind of because we were trying to we were talking about dropout rates and we're talking about school performance, but we kind of backed off the main topic. If you want to get back to it,
well, we're talking about immigration, and the blacks are not an immigrant group in this country.
Yeah.
I mean, they can be, but they're usually not.
Well, it wasn't necessarily showing. It was just showing school funding. It was just showing funding and how that it's a negative correlation to academic output.
Okay,
you're presenting a source that shows that increases in funding don't lead to increases in performance. Could you substantiate that beyond what I assume is just like ghettos, which have a very different situation going on than just like the black and white, big funding, little funding?
Yeah. I mean, like, also, I wish we could get back to the topic at hand. Right?
Yeah, we should probably backtrack to.
Yeah, so do you have any points regarding the economic efficacy of immigration, or do we want to move on to any other, I guess, areas of immigration that we believe to be important?
Yeah, I can try to look, and if not, we can move on to cultural, social cohesion, things of that nature.
Okay.
Let me look.
Blue can take that part. He's good at that.
Yeah, fuck, sorry. I'm currently debating free will.
You think? I'm not going.
No, not worth it.
Nah, not worth it. Definitely not.
I think that's pretty much it. Unless you want to talk about any other economic points.
No, I'm good. That's fine.
All right.
Move on to culture. We've got
I have some questions about mainly your opening statement.
Yeah, sure.
So when you began, you mentioned the
birth replacement
Hart-Celler Act.
Yeah, the Hart-Celler Act,
which you claimed was positive or negative to the country.
Well, I just cited its effects. I just said that since then, 72 million people have been added to the U.S. population, and immigrants make up 65 of the 72. And
so why did you choose to cite that Immigration Act? What about it was negative or positive, or what about it had significance?
Well, I think now we're starting to get into the cultural side of things, and I think the people of a nation are what define a nation, and the people of a nation holding the same values is what unifies a nation and what maintains its cohesiveness.
So values like freedom, ability to make money, things like multiculturalism.
I have a definition of
that's part.
Yeah, no, great. Patriot politics right here. Definition.
Yeah, I have a definition of like American culture in my sense, and I can get your guys' opinion on it done. But a large portion of our culture derives from the WASPs, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants who built our country. The 38 of the 45 presidents' ethnic backgrounds derive from the British Isles. The ideas of a shared history, a shared language, patriotism, individualism, liberty with virtue, aversion to authority, and ancestral unity can be attributed to the European cultures of the founders, which inevitably bled into our culture.
Okay.
I'd also say we have a gun culture in the United States.
Okay. Gun culture is incredibly irrelevant to the basis of immigrants.
Well, I disagree.
Why?
Because they, by majority, are against gun rights. They're by majority against limited government, and they're by majority against free speech.
Wait. And where are you getting? Okay. Wait. It's the law that you're dropping very quickly. I'm confused. So what you're saying is there are basic things that you need to fill to properly assimilate into the country, right? Things like
I'd say being an American has more. It's more nuanced than mere residence.
Oh, okay. I mean, I would say it's definitely not. This has been demonstrated by the fact that it's always kind of been considered a place of freedom. That's one of the core tenets that the country is built on. I would say that's basically the only thing one needs to hold when living in this country. That would probably also mean freedom to move here if you don't necessarily, share a language or.
If you're talking about freedom to associate. You're talking about freedom to associate.
Sure. Yeah.
Freedom to associate as long as you don't. It's that freedom to associate as long as you don't force people out of certain communities.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because when you're talking across borders, you have to think about location. Like here, let me provide an analogy.
So when I say freedom of association, I mean so if you and a couple of your white friends wanted to live in your house and you wanted to keep all other races out, and a black person came to your door and asked to come into your house, you don't have the right to tell him no.
On your private property?
Well, in a sense, right? You can't go up to him and be like, "No, you can't come in here because you're black," right? That's not going to be that's not part of the freedom to associate.
Yeah, in private businesses, I believe you can't. You can't associate.
You can't
discriminate based. Yeah, but basically the point I'm making is when you're talking about freedom of association, when you're talking about across borders, you have to think about location. Like, say me and my friend are freely associating in a restaurant, but then that restaurant owner closes his private property. We're no longer allowed, to freely associate. And I wonder why the
wait. Yeah.
Restaurant to a country.
Because
I don't see why our borders should be looked at as arbitrary, whereas the boundaries to our private property.
Because no one owns the country. We live in a democracy.
Yeah, nobody owns the country.
It seems like you're kind of fetishizing what we escaped from when we formed the country.
It's a completely nonsensical argument. It's
monarchy, the idea that the country should be viewed as a property, as a product that belongs to not a product, a belonging that belongs to someone, is something that we worked very hard to escape from, and then establish these values of freedom, multiculturalism, things like this.
Whoa. Multiculturalism?
Hold up. Wait.
Of American culture.
Calm down. So let's look at how the country was formed, right? Granted, in 1780, or 1790, whenever it was, there definitely were laws that discriminated against certain peoples. But they also had many different cultures from Europe immigrating into the country. I mean, it was formed on the basis of all of these different people from different countries, different European countries, different white countries, I'll admit to that point, right? Coming and then uniting into 13 colonies and rejecting, the crown, right?
Yeah, and to
People
say
from
that
Britain, France, Germany, all of these places, Ireland, Scotland, right? That is
Now-
multiculturalism, whether you want to admit it or not. That's
Now, you use the word unite, and countries don't just hang together on accident. How can you unite if you don't possess the same?
Yeah. So again, they possess this shared belief system, right? This want to have freedom, this want to escape tyranny, this want to not need to live with, a supreme ruler that owns the land, right? To have taxation with representation, things like this, things that are inherently democratic, inherently multiculturalist, inherently anti-closed borders, which is what you're advocating for right now.
I don't think you can draw that equivalency. But first off, the founders weren't avid supporters of democracy, and second off, immigrants don't by and large.
I want to back up. Wait. Can we move away from the point? Are you the reason you said that? Are you saying, like, what? Are you not a supporter of democracy?
Well, I'm personally for voting restrictions. I think there should be a test.
Oh my god! So it should just be classist.
Whoa! Listen to me. So the founders weren't really for all-out pure democracy. They wanted a republic, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Republican
it's democratic, but it's not.
Yeah, whatever. I understand that. I understand that a republic is some form of a democracy, but these people didn't want everyone voting. Ben Franklin said only virtuous people were capable of freedom, and even then, when this nation came corrupt, authority shall increase. That's a quote from Ben Franklin. Franklin also said that democracy was like two wolves or two, fighting over something.
I want to recenter this point on immigration. Sorry. Wait.
No, you can keep going.
I'm sorry. I think you cut out.
I probably did.
Basically, my premise is the reason I was asking about that immigration act that you cited is because that was an anti-discrimination immigration act. It was one that said this is no longer only a country that accepts white people, which is what we did, which is what people like Benjamin Franklin wanted in 1780, and we moved away from that. So I guess I'm just curious why you think that like immigrant groups who come into the country benefit, assimilate within at least a generation, unless there's some other external factor acting on them that makes it impossible for them to do that. Why is that a bad thing?
My point is that immigrants don't concede to basic American principles, and I'm going to name these three principles: limited government, gun rights, and free speech. And
okay.
Let me say
no.
Okay. Gun rights is a different story, right?
So we were founded on gun rights. We were founded on
I'm pro-gun myself, but that doesn't mean that if you aren't pro-gun in the United States, you aren't American.
Yeah, so are you saying that Democrats aren't American?
Yeah, are you saying that like people who are in America currently and don't believe in gun rights aren't American?
I feel like the
not necessarily, but I mean, when a country doesn't believe in certain fundamental principles, like that's literally our Constitution. And
you're claiming that one of our fundamental principles is about a material thing.
Yeah,
it's about self-preservation.
Great, and you can do that without a gun.
You don't have to do that with gun rights.
So I guess here's my. It feels like your definition of what it means to be American is like completely arbitrary and not held by the vast majority of the populace.
Yeah, and also
it's supported by the Constitution, the document that founded the government.
No, those are just those are rights that are granted to Americans. Those aren't things that Americans need to fucking abode by.
They were rights that the government was obligated to protect at all costs.
The rights afforded to Americans by the Constitution do not.
No, rights that pre-existed government.
Okay, wait. Patriot politics. I guess the question is the entire thing about a right is that it implies a choice. So you have the choice to have a gun, or you have the choice not to have a gun, right? They're given the option.
And immigrants vote for infringement upon that right. They vote for a big government with more services, which contradicts the idea of resisting tyranny and aversion to authority, and thereby. Let me say this. According to Cato, 62% of Hispanics, and I say Hispanics because they're the majority of today's immigrants, believe people don't deserve the right of freedom of speech if they don't respect others, compared to 36% of white Americans.
Could you link me that?
Don't respect the right to free speech as long as you don't respect others. Does respect mean like inciting violence?
Yeah, I think it refers to hate speech. It refers to hate speech, which is protected by the Supreme Court. Confirmed by the Supreme Court, protected under the First Amendment.
It just feels like a massive appeal to authority.
First of all, the fact that Hispanics want bigger government doesn't mean that they support literal tyranny. That's a completely nonsensical point.
I was just saying they don't support aversion to authority.
Wait. Next, right? When we talk about your so-called Hispanics are against free speech, I mean, I'm not in support of hate speech laws. Just because the majority of Hispanics don't favor hate speech laws doesn't mean that they're against the literal idea that you should be able to freely speak, right? All it means is that they support certain restrictions on speech that could possibly impede the ability of others to speak, right? That is essentially what hate speech laws try to do. Right? And I'm not saying I like those. I don't like hate speech laws. But the fact that you're saying that because immigrants don't like hate speech laws, that they're somehow against freedom of speech and the Constitution is a completely valid and nonsensical point.
So I want to go into this point you had about big government, right? I'm looking at the notes that you provided.
There it goes.
So it appears as they I guess let me establish something. Would you say, as a people assimilates into America more, they would slowly fit more into these, these ideals that you hold as truly American?
You would assume
if a group was to successfully assimilate, great. Okay, so your source. Hold up, I'm sorry, I lost it.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we can.
I cut out for a little bit. I couldn't hear any of y'all.
No, my bad. We're talking about Hispanics not liking big government. Basically,
no, they do.
So it looks like liking big government rather. Yeah, so when you look at immigrant Latino people, they have 81% holding this view. As you go on, second generation Hispanics, 72% hold this view. Third generation Hispanics, 58% hold this view. It seems like they're assimilating into the country wonderfully under your definition. I mean, you said they would slowly begin to conform more to the values that you hold as American. And it looks like support for big government among the Hispanic population is slowly dropping as they continue to exist in the country, right? So what is the issue?
Yeah, here's the thing. As they progress, further, they build generational wealth. And when you're more wealthy, you won't necessitate, a bigger government with more services because that's what they support initially.
So maybe you understand the real underlying issue here, right? A lot of immigrants from Southern America are poorer, so they want more social safety nets in the same way that poor people in general want better social safety nets, right?
Yeah.
Because they are poor, not because they're not American, because they're looking for a way to put food on the table.
And then again, that's one metric.
Is it
un-American? That majority. So is 90% of Hispanics in the U.S. poor to the extent that they would?
That as your generational wealth increases, your support for big government lessens?
Well, support for big government with more services.
What? No. Okay, so just because someone's generational wealth increases doesn't mean that they automatically adopt small government or big, anti-big government principles, right? And again, the fact that people support big government in the United States doesn't mean they support tyranny, which means it doesn't go against the United States Constitution. And finally, the only way you would be able to consistently apply these ideas is if you were in favor of literally checking everyone's ideology and deporting anyone who believed in gun control, bigger government, or what was the other one? Hate speech laws. If there were three of those people with three of those ideologies, or one of those three ideologies, were in the United States, even if they were native-born people, you should be in favor of deporting them.
Can I ask a question?
Well, it's not so much deporting them. It's limiting their entrance. I don't see why we need to import millions of people who disagree with our fundamental.
So Patriot politics.
Again, they aren't changing them though. Like Patriot, that's not happening.
Give me a second.
Sorry,
Patriot. So one, your arbitrary view of what it means to be American, right? Two, just quickly, if we've already established that as they continue to exist in the country, they assimilate to your values, then why does it matter what they originally believe?
They assimilated to one value. Can you cite the two other metrics?
Yeah, you didn't give me a source on them, so I can't. No.
Generally speaking, immigrants assimilate into cultures after like 1 or 2 generations of immigrants.
Yeah, I have no way to combat your point if you.
I'm gonna find the source.
Favor bigger.
Also, I think I just fundamentally disagree with the idea that.
Seph cited one.
Let me. Yeah. Well,
wait, did you get the? Is it the 80?
Yeah. It is.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, I do think we also have a fundamental disagreement on the.
Oh, okay. So do you think you do know that, like, here's an interesting fact. You do know that, like, Gen Z on average believes in bigger government, right?
I didn't know that, but I believe it.
Oh, they're un-American, bro. They should be deported.
So they aren't American then.
Most Gen Z are not American.
Yeah, me and Seph are nationalists, so we seek to unite under a common culture.
Yeah, and a culture of freedom, individualism, self-determination, right?
Oh, by saying that
always been American.
Freedom of how are you voting for? Whoa! So for freedom, right?
For freedom, I mean, if hate speech laws are literally antithetical to free speech, because in order to live in a free society, you have to risk being offended, and
there's freedom of opinion too. There's freedom of opinion too. There's like the freedom to believe what you want, to live where you want, to be whatever color you are.
Freedom of speech doesn't mean that it has to be speech that abides to the United States Constitution. Bruh. You guys are unironically saying that I believe that immigrants shouldn't be allowed in here because they support hate speech laws, while you're unironically saying that people who don't believe in certain principles that you make up are part of American culture are not American automatically. That
it's just
no
freedom
sense.
of speech. Freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from consequence, right?
Exactly.
Your freedom to swing your your freedom to swing your arms stops where my nose begins. Obviously there are restrictions on existence. You can't be allowed to do everything you want. And if you want such a free if you want such a free government with such little regulation, such a small government, then it's really absurd that you also expect them to maintain borders that are strictly monitored to the point where we are controlling how many people from different cultures enter the nation, right? You can't have both. It feels like your entire ideology is oxymoronic, but that's irrelevant, I guess.
These are
yeah.
My sentiment of freedom, it's self-governance. It's being able to unite, under a common culture, through communities, through families, holding similar ideals. And my basic premise is that you need authoritative standards to step in to implement that. And once you basically get to that point, then you can. Small government can only be truly achieved as a byproduct of a stable society, and a stable society can only be achieved through an integrated, unified populace. So it kind of acts as a buffer.
That was a complete fucking pivot. Holy shit. Okay, we weren't talking about what you believe is the optimal society and how you want
I was talking about freedom. And
we're talking about freedom. We're talking about freedom in the sense that you have the freedom to do things, as in your freedom of choice, not what we believe freedom as a society to be like, right? So when we say freedom of speech, right, we're talking about the positive liberty of you to be able to speak in society. So you have a positive liberty to go outside and say whatever you want, right? But you don't have the negative liberty to be free from consequence, right? So if I go into a theater and I have the freedom to say fire, right? But that does not mean that I did not just incite violence, and I'm not breaking the law.
That's not speech. No, that's not speech. That's a call to action, which is not speech.
All speech is action. That's completely dumb.
No, saying fire in a crowded theater is a call to action.
Yeah, okay, that's true, right? It's an incitement of violence. However, right, the fact that it's incitement of violence, it's an arbitrary line where we decide incitement of violence to begin and why we decide incitement of violence to be a bad form of speech or one that is enforced upon, right? The fact that we enforce consequences upon the incitement of violence only further demonstrates the fact that we limit freedoms of speech in order to better have a more cohesive society, and one that we don't just say whatever the heck we want without any consequences, because that leads to a fundamentally disorganized and uncohesive society. It doesn't lead to a good society in which anyone can say whatever they want, and then without consequences, when things people say can actually have real life effects on people, and that can translate into things that can be like completely catastrophic for a lot of people. The freedom to speak is not the freedom to evade all consequences of that speech.
So you just don't believe in free speech then? I
do. I just don't believe in the freedom of consequence because of speech.
So calling like fire in a crowded theater, that's not free speech. That's not speech.
It is by definition speech.
No, it's
you just decide that you don't have the freedom to say that without having consequences applied to you.
There is a difference between freedom facing consequences for speech and then having that freedom of speech, right?
Yeah, so the thing that's most protected under our Constitution when it comes to freedom of speech is political speech, right? So political speech is something that is protected under the Constitution, right? But like that we decide that certain types of freedom of speech are held as being worse than other types, right? So we apply consequences to those particular types of speech. That is simply what like hate speech laws are trying to do. I don't agree with them, but what they're trying to do is they're trying to classify a portion of speech that is not politically engaged, but is directly targeted towards marginalized and minority communities to, make them feel bad and discriminate against them. Like, I don't know, telling a trans person that they're not of the gender that they identify with, which we know can negatively affect their mental health outcomes and can cause them to commit suicide. These types of speech aren't conducive to a healthy society. They cause problems. They cause negative impacts on a lot of people. And because they do cause these negative impacts, we know that we can apply consequences onto these types of speech.
Yeah, I think we're also getting kind of off topic here because I agree with the sense that you're not free from consequence when you have freedom of speech. But I think we started talking about.
By the way, we have like 3 more minutes.
About freedom, and I think we have to kind of talk about what. And after this, we should probably go into like crime and social cohesion. I think that's a good topic to go into next. But
we're gonna Patriot. We're going into closings in like 2 minutes because.
Oh, for real?
Oh, well,
we decided that was 1 hour.
Oh wait, I want to say one thing because I've been wanting to say this for like forever now. All right, so this is just the last thing I wanted to say, and then I'm gonna let Patriot Politics say whatever he wants to, and I'll shut up for the rest of the time. But would you say, because I remember saying, because like when we were talking about larger government, the first generation of immigrants, 81% said that said that they wanted bigger government, and 72% of second generation. So the more generations it went, the less of them supported big government, right?
The more American they got in your definition.
The more
would you say
assimilated they got?
I would, at least me, because I would say because I'm like my great granddad was like Italian, right? And he was like, and he was pretty dark when he came here. So now I'm white as shit, and I'm like a 4th generation, and there's been studies showing that the lighter a person's skin is, the more like Republican or the more right wing they'll become. So would you say maybe the lighter the Hispanic is coming, the more right wing, and maybe that's the reason.
I don't think there's a causative implication there. I don't think there's like a direct link between someone having.
I'll put the source. I'll put the source and sources real quick.
Yeah, no. I think it's just a general correlation. I mean, white people tend to be conservative, right?
Yeah, white people tend to be conservative. They tend to benefit from Republican laws. as you get richer, you tend to be more conservative.
Yeah, sure, and also light-skinned minorities tend to be more Republican. So that's what I'm saying.
Again, like, are these first-generation immigrants? What is your?
No, this is just what I was saying.
I don't
It's just another kind of confounding variable, but
Possibly,
Yeah,
I don't really see the relevance.
variables here.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
control for like income, maybe. Like,
Sorry. I wasn't gonna ask that. Someone wanted me to say that. Sorry, y'all can continue.
All right.
Everyone in chat who's an alt-writer who's making fun of me for asking is an absolute 2 IQ brainlet. Be quiet.
No, they're all so dumb.
I know. Dude, I will debate literally all of you and win against every
I know 2 people who want to debate you if you're down to.
I'd be down to debate them if they were.
All right.
All right. Let's not get too
Patriot Front based.
Oh, Patriot Front. Oh God. Based.
What?
Patriot Front's based. That's all I'm gonna say.
What's Patriot Front?
You don't know what Patriot Front is?
Oh my God, they're actually making jokes about asking for a citation. How fucking like anti-intellectual can one group of people get?
Dude.
I don't know. Everything I've said, I've had a source for.
Oh,
So
I know. It's weird that all your fans, or I guess supporters, are just anti-empiricism, anti-intellectualism.
I know.
I mean,
anyways, we can go into the closing statements now because it's like 10:05. So
I mean, I don't really have anything written now, so I'll just. Yeah. Do you guys want to go first? Because we don't have anything written.
you don't want to make a closing?
I mean, I can. I guess I can touch upon a topic that we haven't really.
Oh no! Don't make new arguments in the closing. Just
Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, we don't have anything written, so I guess.
Okay. I guess I'll go ahead. So I fundamentally believe throughout the course of this debate that Bluepilled and I have fundamentally proven that not only is immigration a positive in terms of the economic standpoint, but it is also a positive in terms of the cultural and philosophical standpoint when we look at both sides of the arena. I don't think my opponents provided much of any rebuttal to any of our points. Most of their studies that they provided were deeply flawed in their methodologies. Most of everything that they cited were pretty flawed in their methodologies. I mean, most of the points that they made were good and had quite a lot of substance to them, but ultimately they did not meet the mark when it came to fundamentally addressing the core of our arguments. And that is why today I fundamentally believe that Blue and I have won this debate and proven that immigration and immigrants in general have a place in America. They are welcome. They are here. And I will welcome them with open arms as a proud fellow American of the same type. And with that, that's my closing statement. Okay.
Do you want me to try to write something quickly?
you just say words.
Just say something.
I mean, basically, I think through what we have shown, I believe that we have kind of proved that mass immigration can lead to a.
Not you, the chat.
But basically, I think that we proved that mass immigration has overlooked economic defects, along with defects in regards to culture and cohesiveness. And I really think for the future of America and for the sake of our cohesiveness, policy directed at limiting immigration is necessary.
Okay, that's pretty much all the.
I got a closing statement. I like this debate. It went nice. I'm glad we didn't have to scream at each other and we didn't actually have to like.
We could have.
Oh yeah, we could have.
We remain cordial.
We did.
We definitely don't need to stream all this.
Yeah. Okay. So everyone who's watching, thanks for watching the debate. It doesn't look like there are enough people to actually do some questions, but that's okay. Actually, you know what? If you want to ask questions, ask them in the chat. Any questions that are dumb as shit, I might answer them. But like,
follow me on TikTok.
Where's the tab in the Discord for questions?
Just ask general questions about the debate, either side. I can ask them for you.
I'm not looking at the chat. Hold on.
How many?
Luke has a question.
Who won
Luke
the debate?
has a question.
Who won the debate? I probably think we won, and then Patriot probably thinks they won. It's inherently subjective.
It's up for the.
I actually know we won.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident.
It's an axiom.
I mean, I'll have to rewatch it and kind of reevaluate, but
I mean, the Bible is an axiom. So, and since I'm a Christian, I think I kind of won. So I'm just gonna go.
True.
How many Marvel movies do I watch daily? I don't know. I know that's a satirical question, but I'm gonna answer it like it's a real one. I don't watch that many Marvel movies, but I do read comics. So.
Yo, I'm gonna ask a question. Don't get mad about this, Mr. Indian Panini.
Go ahead.
Okay. Have you?
Did you cut out?
Finish that sentence.
Oh wait, no, I was gonna type it.
You're right. Bluepilled was absolutely a Chad in this debate. He carried everything on his two fucking
Luke has a question.
Actually, and yeah, hold on. I was gonna ask this question. Hold on.
Luke posted a question for you guys.
Your family, never mind.
Knowing that English
literacy assimilation has declined over time, how can you equate post-1965 immigration to earlier immigration waves?
What?
Someone asked a question about the JQ.
Oh, someone, Seph.
I ironically have to go to the bathroom right now, so I think I'm probably going to.
Have a nice.
Someone called us Nazis. Yeah, someone called